Coming up, hypocritical Democrats criticise DOGE despite their profligate spending. Some Democrats coming to the realisation that current tactics are not working, and the hyperbole being expressed by left-wing mainstream media. Senator John Kennedy lays out the issue of the growth of the federal debt.
One of the planks in President Trump's platform was that he was going to review every penny of federal government spending. Why did he say that? Why did he promise to do that? Well, first, there's a moral principle involved. People worked hard for their money, and when they give it to government, they're entitled to expect government to spend it efficiently. Number two, President Trump ran on that plank because of our debt. The federal debt is $36.5 trillion. You know, we throw these numbers around like a trillion, you know, we start to take them for granted. To give you a little perspective, this $36.5 trillion, it grows bigger by the second. It's going to increase. If we just keep doing what we've been doing, it's going to increase $1 trillion every 100 days. If we just keep doing what we've been doing, it's going to increase $10 billion a day. Today, nothing changed. We added $10 billion in debt. That's also $417 million an hour. That's $6.9 million a minute.
These numbers that Senator Kennedy talks about still underplay what this means. This increase in federal debt equates to almost $61 per day for every single working American, or $85 a day increase in that debt for every working day for every working American. Is this honestly good budgeting when debt is increasing this much? That is $22,000 more debt being racked up against every single working American per annum. This is a crisis, which is why DOGE working hard, as well as regulatory reform, is so necessary. Meanwhile, the Democrats are not interested. All they're concerned about is covering their butts and keeping every single bloated spending program, no matter the corruption and waste. Look at Representative Seth Moulton.
You voted against the budget?
I voted against a budget that slashes care for 40% of Americans. 40% of Americans depend on Medicaid. 1 out of 3 kids in Massachusetts. Just about everyone who's got parents near the end of life, they depend on Medicaid. And why are we cutting it? To make tax cuts for billionaires, to make tax cuts for the biggest corporations in America. Yeah, it was an easy no vote on that.
So what do you do about the debt and the deficit?
Well, actually, we should probably rein them in.
If they weren't doing the tax cuts, but they wanted to make the same cuts in spending, would you be in favor of it?
I think there's responsible cuts to be made in spending, absolutely. Look, I sit on the Armed Services Committee. I have been a constant critic for my entire time in Congress of how the Pentagon spends money.
This is very revealing. Moulton happily admits to having voted against the bill. Then he makes false assertions about where the cuts will be. See, for instance, Medicare later on. And of course, the obligatory billionaires not paying their fair share and getting a bonus as far as tax cuts are concerned. I recall a rule of thumb when I was in politics, that if you had had an absolute gutful of hearing the same message time after time, then that message had more or less just got through to the community in general. The problem is, this is only relevant if the message has traction. And this message being pushed by the Democrats is gaining no traction. Much was revealed when Cuomo asked if Moulton would have supported the bill if it didn't have the cuts. Him dodging the question here was very clear. Next, there is a long part of the speech by Senator Kennedy about just how egregious the corruption and fraud associated with spending by the Democrats was. If you enjoy this content, please like, share and subscribe. Even though the upcoming clip is longish, please watch all of this. It is utterly astounding.
In April of 2024, not that long ago, the EPA under President Biden gave $2 billion in taxpayer money to an organization that had absolutely no experience, that was backed by a very prominent Democratic politician by the name of Ms. Stacey Abrams. Well, President Trump and DOGE, the group appointed by President Trump, and the EPA under new leadership, under Mr. Lee Zeldin, have begun to follow some of that money. Now, this is where Ms. Stacey Abrams comes in. In March of 2023, not that long ago, Ms. Abrams went to work for an organization, a nonprofit, called Rewiring America. You've probably seen that name in the news. Rewiring America. Ms. Abrams' title, she went to work for Rewiring America, her title was Senior Counsel. She was paid for her work for Rewiring America. We don't know how much, though there'll probably be an investigation to find out. Now, nonprofits like Rewiring America, Ms. Abrams' group, they have to file documents with the IRS. And one of the documents they have to file is called Form 990. This form by the IRS asks a number of questions about nonprofits. One of the questions the IRS asks is where it is for the organization, the nonprofit, to list its accomplishments. Rewiring America, Ms. Abrams' group, told the IRS in 2023 on this Form 990 that Rewiring America was, quote, this was Rewiring America's, quote, startup year for the organization. And the form goes on to say that the only accomplishment Rewiring America listed was that it had, quote, joined a coalition of other national organizations to apply for a grant from the Inflation Reduction Act's Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. As a nonprofit, I told you that Rewiring America had to file forms with the IRS. Well, so did this new group, Power Forward. It had to file Form 990 as well with the IRS. According to its filings, Power Forward had just $100 in total revenues in 2023. According to the IRS filing, it didn't list a single accomplishment. I've seen Girl Scout troops with more business credentials. Yet Power Forward Communities, of which Ms. Abrams' Rewiring America was a part, had the audacity to ask the federal government for a $2 billion grant. For what, you ask? It was supposed to be for, quote, to expand access to clean energy by prioritizing housing, equity, and resilience. Power Forward Community said it wanted to take this taxpayer money and help people install energy-efficient upgrades to their homes. What are we talking about? Heat pumps. Get rid of gas stoves. Now, it's good to dream big in America. I'm all for that. But under any reasonable standard, Mr. President, under any reasonable standard, one is entitled to ask how these organizations, Ms. Abrams' Rewiring America and Power Forward Communities, brand new organizations, no business experience, $100 in the bank, are qualified to receive $2 billion of taxpayer money from the Biden administration. Now, that didn't stop the Biden administration from cutting a check, though.
This is utterly incredible and shows what complete disdain the Democrats have for taxpayers. Extraordinary that the Biden administration was happy to send $2 billion to a group that had $100 and no experience. This is utterly disgraceful. And these are the people that do not want DOGE to find all of the waste, fraud and abuse. I wonder why not? Well, not really. Then we have Democrat Senator Merkley.
So the Republicans in the Senate, as well as the House, have a very simple plan. Families lose, billionaires win.
That ain't right!
That ain't right! Do you like their plan? No! How about a plan where families win and billionaires lose? Yeah! So these billionaires pay their fair share of taxes, which they're not. Yeah! So here we over on the Senate side, and we're hearing that, Trump wants a big, beautiful bill. But I have a question for everyone. Is there anything beautiful about cutting health care for millions of American families? No! Is there anything beautiful about cutting SNAP nutritional payments for millions of families? No! Anything beautiful about cutting medical research across this country to cure the diseases that we want to cure? No! Anything at all beautiful about the Republican plan?
No!
Once again, with all of the nonsense about billionaires, let's be clear here. The top 1% pay 40% of all federal income tax. So much for the politics of envy. Another talking point of the Democrats is that supposedly the Republican plan is to cut Medicare. You hear this time and time again. So let's see where the truth about this is.
I've gone through the budget. This is the House Republican budget that was passed unanimously by Republicans. Every Democrat voted no. Go through this entire bill. Do you know that for every Democrat talking point where they talk about the horrible things that this budget's going to do, they talk about Medicaid cuts. Everybody's going to be thrown, according to Democrats, into all these horrible situations. There's only one problem. The word Medicaid is not even in this bill. This bill doesn't even mention the word Medicaid a single time, and yet all Democrats are doing is lying about what's in the budget because they don't want to talk about the truth of what we're voting to start. We're voting to start a process. This doesn't end the process. This allows 11 committees in Congress to go in open view on C-SPAN to have hearings in March where you can all watch, you can all hear the debate, you can watch the amendments fly back and forth, where we're going to be debating how government can work better for the people of this country.
Congressman Scalise puts the lie to the claims that Medicare is about to be cut. Either the Democrats are just incorrigible liars, or they did not bother to even read the bill that they voted no on. The Democrats simply accepted their party's talking points and voted against the bill, despite not having a clue what is actually in it. This latter point is probably the truth. I saw that sort of behaviour often in Australian Parliament when I was a representative for 12 years. Then you have the Democrats possibly finally coming to an understanding of reality.
I think Donald Trump floods the zone, and I think we should flood the zone. I think every single day we should be talking about the corruption. Every single day we should be talking about the billionaire takeover of government. And I think if we do that, we promise the American public that this is the alarm, the red alert moment that many of us believe it is.
Here's the catch on that. It's like waste, fraud, and abuse. You find overwhelming, strong majorities of Americans say, root it out. And I mean, you're making the case that Democrats have been on the wrong side of the issues. And maybe here is another example of that.
I think it's a great example, Bill, because I think Americans know that government could be more efficient. I've been in Congress for 10 years, and for 10 years I've been talking about the Pentagon, for example, how we keep investing in old-fashioned weapon system, big aircraft carriers, expensive fighter jets, when the future is drones, it's autonomous stuff. I mean, we need to make this transition, and you can save a lot of money if you do that. But here's the thing. the way that Musk and DOGE are going about this, they're not just trying to make government more efficient, they're trying to make it non-existent.
Once again, with a stupid Democrat talking point about billionaires. Some of the Democrats just keep pushing a losing message. Moulton comes in and sounds halfway reasonable about some things, but he keeps on dodging the central point of DOGE. Some of it, the work of DOGE, is finding the immediate waste, fraud and corruption. But the primary thing to do is find the systemic waste, fraud and abuse and cut those systems. Moulton sees this as cutting the government to nothing. That is not the case. It is cutting government to be a lean machine, not the bloated behemoth that it is now. I've seen too much of this in my time in politics in Australia. You have a program that is not essential, but it is used as a vote-buying exercise. So, the first time the money rolls in, the voters say, thank you. But after that, it is then seen by the voters as a fixture. So the fact that you have that program is now not a positive, it is just neutral. Then to cut that program is a negative, so you don't do it. But you want to make sure that you continue buying votes. And so another program is added to try and buy voters again. And so it goes on. Then we have Democrat Rep. Ro Khanna.
You outlined earlier, you and Bernie do, which is work with them if they actually do agree with us on anything and then fight them on things we disagree on. What I'm curious about is there a third plan? Because I don't see another plan. So does Democratic leadership, without naming names, but do they have one? Because the country hasn't seen it. What is their plan for how to deal with the Trump administration?
I think their plan is the plan that Democrats have gone through time and again, which is to point out, which is true, that a lot of these cuts are going to deeply hurt people. The Medicaid cuts, the cuts in people who keep our planes safe and prevent bird flu and keep our nuclear secrets safe and fund cancer research. Here's my problem with that. I actually believe it'll work for 2026 because I think for the first time, Trump's numbers are below the water on the economy. His entire first term, he didn't have his numbers low on the economy, below 50%. But for some reason, he decided that instead of being a Trump Republican, he's going to allow Elon Musk to become a Mitt Romney, Paul Ryan Republican on steroids. And he's seeing the consequences. Fine. So we get back the House. Maybe we even win the presidency by default. What is our vision? What is our vision just to continue to try to win by default because they go too far and then not have a governing majority in the House or the Senate where we're actually being able to address the legitimate anger of working class Americans of all races? Or are we going to try to do something meaningful with the power we will be handed? And that to me is the failure of leadership.
Cenk Uygur points out one of Khanna's reasonable points, that Democrats should assess individual policies on their own regard and support or not on the basis of merit. He talks about fighting Republican policies, but he gets into the nonsense of the Medicare cuts again. But he makes a valid point that the Democrats have no plans. They have no vision. This is the way politicians should behave, to actually have a view of where the country should be headed. At present, the Democrats' vision is a simple one, to be anti-Trump. That is simply not good enough. Then we have Mike Donnellan being completely ridiculous.
Lots of people have terrible debates. Usually, the party doesn't lose its mind. But that's what happened here. It melted down. My view is, I think it was insane. I think the party lost its mind.
So his problem is that Biden was pushed out. I mean, should Biden have been in? Would they have prevailed? Is that what he's saying?
No, Kayleigh, Mr. Donnellan, with all due respect, was one of the ringleaders of the cover-up that wasn't just a bad debate. That was a symptom of a president who was reaching the end of his first term, not on solid footing, was not going to win that race no matter what, and surely could not serve another 4 years. Mr. Donilon knows that. But we have this really perverse incentive in Washington, D.C., on both sides of the aisle, to protect and preserve your proximity to power. And I'm afraid Mr. Donilon, like so many others on your show and on all the evening cable shows, say the same thing months down the road and forget where they were, when the real issues happened. And I'm afraid he's just one of them, and that's the problem. People more concerned about their self-preservation than their principles.
Yeah, power is intoxicating. We see it all too much in Washington. Dean Phillips, thank you.
Dean Phillips talks about the issue of defending what keeps people close to power. He's absolutely correct that there was no hope of Biden either winning or serving another term as president. Donilon's characterization of a bad debate is insane, himself putting this position. The point here is that the media did not call Biden out on what was always patently obvious about Biden in terms of both his cognitive decline and his physical decline. Indeed, we have Mark Halperin on the media next.
Put a sharper point on one thing you said. Of all the examples of liberal media bias denied by the people who run the big organizations, of all the examples, perhaps the most egregious is they hire media writers who are far, far left. As if they're covering the media fairly. If you're going to have a media writer whose job it is to hold the media account, you cannot hire people who hate Donald Trump. And their coverage isn't subtle. It's not like some of the New York Times coverage, for instance, where within the crevices of the paragraphs you can see they're biased against Trump. They are full-on resistance writers, and that's why they write negative things about Mark Caputo and me, and why they did not touch this Jen Psaki story. It's batshit crazy for these organizations who claim to be serious news organizations to have as their media reporters leading members of the resistance, unapologetic and explicit, who to this day have not written about Joe Biden, the lack of coverage of Joe Biden's loss of mental acuity. To this day.
The story here is about MSNBC hiring Jen Psaki immediately after she quit as White House press secretary. That is unbelievable, as there is no pretense here at all. This was always going to be a hyper-partisan issue. But then the majority of legacy media is hyper-partisan. The legacy media certainly don't speak truth to power. In fact, in their case, they will do whatever they can to run a protection racket. And they do not care about the impact of this on the United States. They clearly believe that because the United States is a rich nation, that abysmal policy that hurts Americans is irrelevant, as the country is strong enough and rich enough to weather it. Then they wonder why legacy media is not guaranteed spots in the White House press room and on Air Force One. Scott Jennings gives some perspective on this.
Okay, can we just address this dictator business? I'm going to quote from some statistics put together. So our old friend Chris Cillizza, who calculated that in the first month of the Trump administration, the president took 1,009 questions. Hardly dictatorial behavior. Same stat for Joe Biden, 141. And I would remind you all that in 2023, the Biden administration revoked the hard passes of 442 journalists. And at the time, the White House Correspondents Association took, quote, a non-committal stance. So if you're worried about transparency, Trump is being far more transparent than any recent administration.
Why were their press passes revoked?
I don't know.
Was it because they didn't go to the White House frequently? Because
I don't know. They lost their access.
That happens in every administration.
They lost their access.
Besides, 442. Biden people never called on James Rosen from Newsmax, and he's a real legitimate reporter. They never called on him.
Allowed in the White
press
House.
room. Yeah.
Scott Jennings points out how accessible and transparent the Trump administration is compared to Biden, where there was no complaint by the press about that lack of access, or in fact, the 441 press passes being revoked. The moderator tries to push Democrat talking points asking what they were revoked for. But there were no questions about that revocation at the time. She also tries to say that Newsmax has access because they're allowed in the White House. But that doesn't make the distinction between the White House and the White House briefing room. This is the sticking point with many about the Associated Press issue. But of course, the Democrat talking heads don't want to address that. Then we have Jamie Raskin misrepresenting things.
I hear about the prosecution and vilification of parents, of mothers and fathers. And hey, I'm a father. My kids went to public school. That doesn't sound very good to me. So I try to get to the bottom of this because I've been hearing about it for 5 years now. And I ask myself, what are they talking about? So I get the memo, which was from Attorney General Merrick Garland. And it begins, I don't have time to read the whole thing. There's been a disturbing spike in harassment, intimidation, and threats of violence against school administrators, teachers, board members, and staff. The word mother or father don't appear. The word parent doesn't appear here. There's all of this propaganda about some prosecution of parents is based on absolutely nothing. This is just made up out of thin air. So I will submit this for the record. The memo, though, all this goes back to Mr. Chairman. Thanks so much.
Without objection.
It's all very well about the Merrick Garland memo not saying parent or mother or father, but this is just completely disingenuous. Raskin neglected to say that the Garland memo was in response to a letter from the National School Board Association requesting that the government get involved in the immediate threat of parents who spoke and protested at school board meetings. But then again, Raskin is a serial offender, so no surprise here. Then we have Tulsi Gabbard on the CIA selling secrets to enemies.
Because now we're hearing CIA agents don't like getting DOGE, so they're going to sell state secrets to our enemies? What are we going to do here?
I am curious about how they think this is a good tactic to keep their job. They're exposing themselves essentially by making this indirect threat using their propaganda arm through CNN that they've used over and over and over again to reveal their hand that their loyalty is not at all to America. It is not to the American people or the Constitution. It is to themselves. And these are exactly the kind of people that we need to root out, get rid of, so that the patriots who do work in this area, who are committed to our core mission, can actually focus on that. I got to tell you, one of the byproducts of what I just saw literally today is because of this immediate action of transparency and accountability, I have people within the intelligence community reaching out to me personally and directly saying, hey, you need to know about this. You need to look over here. People are stepping forward because they are all on board with the mission to clean house and refocus on our core mission of serving the American people.
Gabbard is correct. These people should be sacked, as their focus is not on doing their duty or indeed to the people of the United States. I would go further. They should be charged. This is treasonous behaviour. What do you think about the behaviour that Senator Kennedy highlighted? Please let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching.